My friends, have you ever looked at a man and thought, he's doing everything a man in love would do, but he just doesn't seem to realize it? You're not imagining it. Some men are in love long before they're aware of it. Many people misunderstand how men express emotion, especially when it comes to love. There's often a cultural expectation that love must be declared in bold, poetic language, grand, romantic gestures, passionate proclamations, emotional vulnerability laid bare. And while some men do love this way, many others express affection in ways that are much less direct, but just as real. In fact, some of the most emotionally invested men are the ones who don't even realize how deeply they feel because they're showing it, not saying it. For many men, emotion is processed through action, not articulation. This is deeply rooted in how boys are often raised. From a young age, a lot of men are taught to suppress feelings, to be stoic, to push down vulnerability in favor of strength. As a result, when they fall in love, they don't always have the vocabulary or emotional awareness to name it. But that doesn't mean the love. It just means it's being communicated in different ways, through behavior, through time, through effort. A man who cancels plans with his friends to be with you, who checks in when he knows you're having a tough day, who remembers the details of stories you told weeks ago, that's a man acting out of care. That's a man whose feelings are guiding his decisions, even if he hasn't consciously said, "I'm falling for her." The way he rearranges his schedule, makes room for you in his life, or goes out of his way to make sure you're okay, these aren't just acts of kindness. These are acts of emotional priority. This isn't about excusing men from emotional expression or setting a low bar for emotional connection. It's about understanding that there's more than one way to communicate love. When a man feels something strong, he may not run to say it, but he will often begin to shift his behavior. He will invest, show up, and protect what he's building with you. For many men, showing up consistently is their version of "I love you," even if the words haven't crossed the. It's also important to recognize that because men often link their self-worth to performance or usefulness, their way of showing love is through doing, fixing problems, offering help, creating security, or even just being physically present. These are their expressions of value, and because they may have never been taught to explore or label their emotions, they often miss the moment where affection becomes attachment and attachment becomes love. They're already doing all the things that a man in love does. They just haven't given it a name. This is where confusion often arises. You might look at this man and wonder, how can he be so committed, so thoughtful, so present, and still not know he's in love? The truth is, love for him may feel like home, familiar, safe, and slowly developed. There's no dramatic revelation, no movie wavy moment. Instead, it creeps in gently through repetition, through shared experiences, through the ease that builds when two people spend time really knowing each other. He may not have put his feelings into words yet, but his body language, his priorities, and his choices are speaking volumes. And often, the reason he doesn't know how in love he is because love didn't arrive like lightning. It grew with you, and because it grew gradually, it felt natural, too natural for him to realize that something profound was actually happening. When he begins to feel like he's responsible for your happiness, when he worries about how his decisions impact your well-being, when he seeks your opinion before making big choices, he's more emotionally invested than he probably realizes. These are signs of emotional depth. These are not just habits, they are indicators of an emotional shift, a shift that looks a lot like love. So, if you're wondering whether he's in love, don't just listen to his words. Watch his behavior. See how he acts when no one is watching. How much thought he puts into your comfort. How much time and energy he's willing to offer without being asked. You may come to see what he hasn't figured out yet. That his love is already present. He's just living it before he's able to name it. Love is not always a moment of realization. For many people, especially men, it doesn't arrive as dramatic, all-consuming feeling that suddenly overwhelms them. It often builds slowly, quietly, through experience and emotional connection. A man might be deeply involved, loyal, and emotionally available without even knowing that what he's feeling is love. And that's because emotional awareness is not always immediate. Being loving requires company with clarity, that the person who feels it will know it, name it, and express it without hesitation. But the truth is, love doesn't always look the way we expect. For some, especially men who haven't been encouraged to explore their emotional world, love sneaks up on them. It exists in their actions, in their consistency, in the way they prioritize you. Yet they may not consciously label those feelings as love, at least not yet. This isn't about emotional immaturity or avoidance. It's often about the way emotional development unfolds. Many men are socialized to focus on logic, responsibility, and tangible goals. Emotional introspection may not be something they were taught to value or even trust. As a result, even when they're acting out of care, affection, or deep emotional investment, they might not immediately connect those actions to the concept of love. They know they enjoy being around you. They feel safe with you. They want to share their world with you. But they don't always know what that means emotionally. Emotional clarity takes time. A man might begin to structure his life around you, introduce you to his family, or share his most vulnerable thoughts, and still hesitate to say the words, "I love you." This hesitation isn't always because he doesn't feel it. It's often because he doesn't realize he already does. The label love feels too serious, too final, too weighty. And until he fully understands what he's feeling, until it reaches a place where he feels safe and certain, he may hold off on calling it what it is. We have to recognize that emotional self-awareness is a skill. It doesn't come equally to everyone. Some people are naturally attuned to their internal states. Others need experiences to help them process what's going on inside. For many men, the experience of love becomes clear only in hindsight, when they realize they were already emotionally involved long before they were ready to admit it to themselves. He might not say "I love you," but he stays up late to talk when you've had a rough day. He offers support when you're stressed. He includes you in his future plans, not as a casual addition, but as someone who belongs there. He may not be sitting with his emotions and analyzing them, but everything about how he treats you points to something real and deeply rooted. That is love in progress. It is love before awareness, and it is no less valid. There's also a fear factor at play. To name love is to commit to it emotionally. Once a man says, "I love you," it becomes real. It means there's something to lose. It means he's opening the door to vulnerability, uncertainty, and possible heartbreak. For some, that's a terrifying leap, especially if they've been hurt before or haven't had healthy emotional models growing up. So instead of naming the feeling, they live inside it. They stay close, protect it, nurture it, but they don't speak it, not until they're sure they're ready to risk what comes next. This is why so many women find themselves confused. They feel loved, they see the signs, but they don't hear the words. It's not because the feeling isn't there, it's because the emotional realization is still catching up. He may need time to sit with what he's experiencing. He may need to feel safe enough, certain enough to let his emotional guard down. And often, when he finally does say it, it's not because he suddenly fell in love. It's because he finally realized he was already there. Patience plays a key role in moments like this. When you understand that emotional awareness doesn't always run parallel to emotional behavior, you begin to see things differently. You stop waiting for declarations and start noticing the depth of what's already present. The way he listens, the way he protects your peace, the way he keeps showing up. These things may not come with a label yet, but they are love in motion. Anything? When he finally connects the dots, when his head catches up with his heart, it's not a change in what he feels, it's a change in what he understands. He doesn't suddenly fall in love. He simply realizes he's been in love all along. When we think about love, we often think of the big cinematic moments, the passionate speeches, the spontaneous trips, the overwhelming intensity. But real love, especially the kind that lasts, is more often built in the quieter, less dramatic moments. It's not just about intensity, it's about consistency. And this is especially true when it comes to understanding whether someone is emotionally invested. Grand gestures can be moving, but it's the consistent, repeated behavior that reveals the deeper truth of someone's feelings. A man might not buy you roses every week or write you poetry, but if he checks in on you when you're sick, remembers your favorite takeout order, or rearranges his schedule to spend meaningful time with you, those are signs that his emotional commitment runs deeper than words or one-time acts of affection. These behaviors may not always seem extraordinary on the surface, but they are often far more telling than any spontaneous gift or one-night display of devotion. The challenge is that our culture often elevates intensity over reliability. We're taught to associate love with adrenaline, butterflies, passion, urgency, but adrenaline fades. What remains is someone's ability and willingness to keep showing up, to choose you not just once in a romantic flurry, but over and over again in the small decisions that make up daily life. That's where real connection is built, through habits, not highlights. A man who is emotionally invested will show it in how he integrates you into his routine. He'll start including you in his plans, not just his Friday nights, but in his long-term thinking. He'll introduce you to the people who matter in his life, not because it's expected, but because it feels natural. He'll remember your preferences, support your goals, and show up when things are difficult, not just when it's convenient. These patterns don't emerge from obligation, they come from care, from emotional investment, from a place that says, you matter to me and I'm willing to prove it, not just once, but continuously. Anyone can plan an elaborate date or say the right thing in a heated moment of passion, but those things, while enjoyable, are often short-lived if they're not backed by real substance. Emotional availability doesn't always come dressed in fireworks. It often shows up in stability, in the person who texts to make sure you got home safe, in the person who remembers that important meeting you were nervous about and asks how it went, in the person who notices when your energy shifts and takes the time to ask what's going on. That's why consistency is such a powerful indicator of someone's emotional reality. When someone keeps showing up day after day in big and small ways, it speaks to something deeper. It tells you that their affection is not just a reaction to mood or circumstance. It's a steady part of how they relate to you. And that level of investment doesn't happen by accident. It's not casual. It's not convenience. It's choice. You may even find that he doesn't fully realize how much he's investing. It may just feel like the natural way he wants to be with you, something that grows without needing to be labeled. But the fact that he keeps showing up, prioritizing you, making space for you emotionally, and is the real clue, whether or not he's articulated it yet, love is already in motion. It's in the rhythm of his presence, not in the volume of his declarations. And if you're trying to determine whether he's truly invested, pay attention to the patterns, not just the peaks. Does he disappear when things get tough, or does he stay emotionally present? Does he only engage when it benefits him, or does he show up for you in ways that have no immediate payoff? These are the questions that reveal the substance of a connection, because anyone can show up once, but only someone who truly cares will continue showing up, even when life gets messy, inconvenient, or uncertain. So if you're in a situation where you're wondering what his feelings really are, start by observing his consistency. Notice the effort he puts in, the reliability of his attention, the rhythm of his care. These are not small things. In fact, they are often the most significant, because love is not just what someone says in the moment. It's what they continue to do, even when no one's watching, even when they don't realize they're already living like someone who's in love. Love is one of the most powerful emotions we experience, but it's also one of the most vulnerable. To love someone is to risk being hurt, to risk being seen in your rawest, most unguarded state. And for many men, that kind of exposure is deeply uncomfortable, not because they don't feel love, but because the vulnerability that comes with it can be frightening. That fear doesn't erase the love, it just complicates the path to recognizing and expressing it. Vulnerability hasn't been modeled as strength. Instead, it's been portrayed as weakness. From a young age, many boys are taught, explicitly or implicitly, that emotions should be contained, not explored. They're told to be strong, independent, and in control. So when a man begins to feel love, an emotion that by its very nature requires openness and surrender, it can trigger a kind of internal resistance. His logical mind might try to protect him from feelings that feel too intense, too risky, or too consuming. He might begin to feel more invested in someone than he intended. He might catch himself thinking about her constantly, caring deeply about her happiness, or adjusting his life around her presence. And yet, instead of embracing those feelings, he might downplay them or ignore them altogether. Not because they aren't real, but because acknowledging them would mean letting his guard down. For some men, admitting they're in love feels like giving someone else the power to hurt them, and that can be terrifying. Fear shows up in many forms. It might look like pulling back when things get emotionally intense. It might look like hesitating to commit, even when everything else seems aligned. Or it might come across as confusion, an internal struggle between how he acts and how he allows himself to feel. He might wonder, why do I care so much? Or why do I feel unsettled when she's not around? But instead of interpreting those reactions as love, he may see them as discomfort or even danger. He's not just processing emotions, he's fighting against a lifetime of conditioning that taught him to protect himself from feelings that are hard to control. Love is unpredictable. It opens doors to potential rejection, disappointment, and change. And for a man who values control, structure, and emotional safety, those unknowns can feel overwhelming. There's also the fear of not being enough. When a man begins to fall for someone, it often brings his insecurities to the surface. Will I be able to give her what she needs? Will I measure up? What if she sees the parts of me I try to hide? These questions can paralyze him, making it difficult to embrace what he's feeling, even when his heart is already invested. Love, while beautiful, can also feel like a threat to the identity he's worked hard to maintain. This fear doesn't mean he's incapable of loving, it just means his emotional journey might take a little longer. While he's acting in ways that show he cares, making time for you, checking in, being present, he might still be struggling internally to connect those actions to what they mean emotionally. His fear of being vulnerable is acting as a filter, delaying the moment where he can fully face the truth, that he's not just attracted, not just interested, but that he's already in love. What often happens is that the emotional reality reveals itself through contrast. He might go a few days without talking to you and feel a sense of emptiness he didn't expect. Or he sees you connect with someone else and feels an unfamiliar sense of protectiveness. These subtle experiences begin to challenge the walls he's built, and in those cracks, love starts to make itself known. Not in an instant realization, but in a slow unraveling of his emotional defenses. The key is to understand that this process is not about pressure, it's about patience. You can't force someone to confront what they're not ready to feel, but you can recognize the signs that love is already there. Underneath the fear, you can see the way he shows up, how much he pays attention, how deeply he cares. And while he may not yet have the courage or clarity to name it, his actions often speak for him. As his sense of safety grows and his fear begins to shrink, he will start to connect the dots. He will realize that the discomfort he felt wasn't fear of you, it was fear of how much he cares. And once he understands that vulnerability is not weakness, but the gateway to real connection, he'll begin to see that he's been in love all along. He just didn't know how to let himself feel it. When a man is emotionally invested, his love doesn't always show up in the way you might expect, through romantic declarations, constant compliments, or dramatic gestures. Instead, one of the most powerful signs of his feelings is how he begins to shape his life around you. It's in the subtle shifts, the way he consults you before making a decision, considers your happiness when planning his week, or starts including you in conversations about the future. These behaviors are often overlooked, but they are significant. They reveal that he's thinking in terms of we rather than just me. This shift doesn't usually happen because someone told him he should act a certain way. It happens organically, often without him even realizing it. Love has a way of rearranging priorities. When a man starts to care deeply for someone, that person's needs, opinions, and well-being begin to matter as much as, or sometimes more than, his own. He may not announce it with words, but he shows it through how he moves through the world with you in mind. One of the most telling signs of this kind of emotional investment is consideration. He thinks about how his choices affect you. If he's planning a weekend trip, he checks in to see what your schedule looks like. If he's thinking about making a major career move, he talks to you about it first. Not because he's seeking permission, but because your opinion holds weight. Because your presence in his life isn't just something he enjoys, it's something he factors in when thinking about what comes next. You might notice this in conversations where he casually includes you in future scenarios. We should go there next summer, or that's the kind of place we'd love. These aren't just throwaway comments. They're small windows into how he sees the future, and more importantly, who he sees in it. Even if he hasn't fully acknowledged it to himself, this inclusion signals that you're no longer just part of his present, you're beginning to be part of his plan. It also shows up in how he shows concern for your emotional state. If he senses something is off, he doesn't just brush it aside. He asks how you're feeling. He makes space for you to talk, or just be heard. That attentiveness, especially when it comes from a place of emotional responsibility, isn't casual. It's a reflection of someone who is not only aware of your emotions, but also feels accountable for how you experience life together. That's not something someone does for a passing interest. That's something a man does when he's deeply emotionally invested. He may also start aligning his personal growth with your presence. This means making changes, not because he has to, but because he wants to. Maybe he becomes more thoughtful, more open, or more driven. Your influence starts to shape him in subtle but meaningful ways. That doesn't mean he's changing to please you. It means he values the connection so much that he naturally evolves to make it stronger, more secure, and more fulfilling. That is love in action. A man in this space begins to protect the relationship, not in an aggressive way, but in a thoughtful, intentional way. He makes decisions that preserve your trust, your emotional safety, and the health of the bond you share. He becomes mindful of how he speaks to you, how he navigates conflict, and how he contributes to the dynamic between you. That sense of protection isn't about control, it's about care. It's about safeguarding something that means a great deal to him, even if he hasn't labeled it love just yet. These signs are easy to overlook if you're only listening for the words, but when you tune into his behavior, you'll begin to see the truth. He's more emotionally involved than he realizes. His actions are communicating what his mind might still be catching up to, that he sees you as part of his world, that he's making space for you, not just today, but in what comes next. So if you're trying to understand where he stands, look at how he moves through life in relation to you. Does he make space for you in the day-to-day? Does he include you in his decisions, his future, his thought process? These aren't just habits, they're emotional signals. They say, you matter to me. I see you in my life. I'm not just here right now, I'm building something with you. That is love lived, shown, and felt, even if it hasn't been said yet. Love isn't always loud. It's not always wrapped in perfect words or expressed in grand gestures. Sometimes it's quiet. It unfolds slowly, revealed through presence, consistency, and the way someone begins to shape their world around you without even noticing. A man may not say, I love you right away. He may not even consciously realize how deep his feelings go, but if you look closely, his actions will speak for him. He shows up. He listens, he adjusts, he cares in ways that aren't performative but deeply rooted in who he's becoming because of you. And often it's not until later, when he reflects on how much space you now take up in his heart and in his life, that he realizes he's been in love all along. The truth is, he's more in love with you than he knows. And your role isn't to force the realization, but to recognize the truth of what's already unfolding and trust that in time he will too.